It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Police investigate the Deputy Labour leader. Angela Rayner offers to step down if she is found to have broken electoral law over her former living situation. Also tonight, Israel on alert. The US says it's moving additional assets to the Middle East to protect American forces and its allies from Iran and an imminent attack.
My expectation sooner than later.
A warning for Britain to get prepared for any future wars as Labour vows to commit to the UK's nuclear deterrent. A former post office boss apologises for saying subpostmasters had their hands in the till as the inquiry into the scandal continues. Searching for answers, the grandson of murdered Muriel McKay goes to the site where her killer says she was buried, but police are yet to dig there. New safety measures on course for this year's Grand National. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. She's the deputy leader of the Labour Party and hoping to be in government after the next general election. But Angela Rayner has been shrouded in controversy in the past few weeks over her former home. Greater Manchester Police have now said they will investigate the claims that she broke electoral law over information she gave about her living situation a decade ago. Well, tonight, Miss Rayner has said she will do the right thing and step down if she is found to have committed a crime. Sky's political correspondent Sarina Barker-Singh reports now from Stockport.
The house in Stockport at the centre of a political storm once again. Greater Manchester Police said today they are reopening a probe into whether Labour's Angela Rayner broke electoral law 10 years ago and are reassessing information provided to them by a Conservative MP.
It just shows that actually Westminster is not always where it's all happening.
All of this was before the Deputy Labour leader became an MP, when she said this was her principal property and so it was where she registered to vote. Police are now investigating whether she might have actually lived here, a mile away, at the home of her then husband Mark Rayner and their children.
Did you know that Angela Rayner used to own a property just over there?
No, not until today.
Neighbours we spoke to at both residences told us they don't really remember her at either.
No, nobody's ever mentioned it, but, you know, you don't always know, do you? So, yeah, it's quite a close-knit area, but I've not heard about that.
The Labour leader Keir Starmer has always insisted she's done nothing wrong.
We welcome this investigation because it will allow a line to be drawn in relation to this matter.
Meanwhile, the Conservatives have been putting the boot in, the party chairman writing to Sir Keir Starmer and Rayner earlier this week.
It's not acceptable to ignore it, and it's not acceptable for Keir Starmer to say he won't even read reports into it. This is something which is a serious matter. It's important that it's looked into properly, and I welcome the idea that the police are doing that.
Angela Rayner released a statement saying, "I welcome the chance to sit down with the appropriate authorities, including the police and HMRC. I am completely confident I've followed the rules at all times." She said, "I make no apologies for having held Conservative ministers to account in the past. Indeed, the public would rightly expect me to do so. And if I have committed a criminal offence, I would of course do the right thing and step down."
When people think of electoral law, they think of spending breaches or widespread fraud or postal ballots, that kind of thing. Putting the wrong address on a form could be very serious if you're running for kind of a local election where you have a requirement to live within that particular area. Where it's kind of not that serious, where you're looking at something, a wrong address, allegedly, of a lower scale, it would be very unusual, I think, to see a prosecution.
It's clear this is becoming a political headache for the party.
Ladies and gentlemen, Angela Rayner.
The facts of the case of whether she was registered to vote in the right place now to be decided by Greater Manchester Police. Sarina Barker-Singh, Sky News.
Well, let's go live to Westminster now and our political correspondent there, Gurpreet Narwan. Gurpreet, has this been damaging for the deputy leader? She has said that she will step down if she is found to have committed a criminal offence.
Well, it threatens to get more and more damaging. the longer it runs, and if the Conservatives have anything to do with it. It's a story that's been following her around for several weeks now, and shadow frontbenchers continue to be asked about it in interviews. It's fair to say it's been a distraction for the party, and I think that explains why we got that lengthy statement from Angela Rayner today in response to news that Greater Manchester Police is to open an investigation into everything that went on. I think the key takeaway from that statement is her saying that she would resign if it is found that she has broken the law. And I think in doing so, she's hoping to achieve a few things. First of all, to try and put the story to bed for now, but you can bet that the Conservatives will continue to bring it up again and again, calling for her to resign and accusing her of hypocrisy, pointing out that she is often one of the first Labour frontbenchers to call out any opposition MPs who have fallen foul of the rules. Indeed, she was very outspoken in her views on Boris Johnson's position as Prime Minister when it emerged that the Met Police was opening an investigation into Partygate. So there's obviously a bit of political game playing going on, and Angela Rayner pointed that out in her statement, saying that the Conservatives were simply trying to distract from their own poor record. And indeed, the Conservatives have been pushing this story forward. James Daly, the party's deputy chairman, was pushing for Greater Manchester Police to open that investigation. But so I guess she's trying to show that the Conservatives are engaging in desperate tactics, while she is taking on this principled role, this principled position of saying that she would resign if she's found to have broken the law. Perhaps unlike some of her Tory counterparts, it's a tactic that Keir Starmer deployed during Beergate, where he said he would resign as party leader if he was found to have broken the law. She, Angela Rayner, for now, is adamant that she says she's confident that she's followed the rules at all times, but that won't stop the Conservatives from bringing this up again and again and trying to use it to tarnish her reputation.
Indeed. Gurpreet, thank you. The US says it's moving additional assets to the Middle East to increase protection for US forces, describing the threat of an imminent attack from Iran on Israel as real and viable. Attacks have increased in the region since the start of the war between Israel and Hamas. If Iran attacked Israel directly, it would be the first escalation which didn't involve a proxy nation. Sky's international correspondent Alex Rossi has this report from Jerusalem.
As they shop for Shabbat, the Jewish day of rest, people here know the country is on high alert. The market in Jerusalem is busy, but there's apprehension about what could happen in the coming days.
Israel's been threatened by Iran for many years. They've acted on these threats many times. But we're still here.
We don't know what's going to happen, but it's scary. It's scary to live this life.
The threat from Iranian proxies is already real. Yossi had to evacuate his home in the north of Israel, along with tens of thousands of others, because of the daily exchanges between Hezbollah and the Israeli military. He's now living in a hotel.
I'm in Jerusalem because we don't have any shelter where I live. We don't have any place, a security place. If I was a security place, I would stay over there.
Israel and Iran have long been enemies, but there is a risk now of open war. Ayatollah Khamenei is vowing retaliation after an airstrike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, understood to be conducted by Israel, which killed 2 senior generals. At this gathering a few days ago, crowds chanting "Death to Israel." There's widespread anger across the country, and it makes a response more likely. Security sources in the United States say a missile strike on Israel from Iran is now imminent. It could happen in the next couple of days. Diplomatic efforts to try and de-escalate the situation are going on behind the scenes. Israel says it's prepared for any scenario and is warning the Iranians that if they do attack, there will be serious consequences. Former head of the Mossad intelligence division, Haim Tomer, warns the risk of miscalculation and a regional war is great.
Well, up till now, the strategy of Iran was to operate proxies. By now, they are saying actually by their own lips that you kill our generals, we would respond directly towards Israel this time. That could be a change, a game changer, no question about that.
If an attack happens, it's not clear what Iran would target. But in Israel, with the memory of the October the 7th terror attack still raw, they worry the conflict is about to escalate. Peace and security here feel further away than ever. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Let's speak to our US correspondent now, Mark Stone in Washington, D.C. Mark, it seems the US is really taking this threat seriously. Is it a foregone conclusion, then, that there will be an attack on Israel from Iran?
I think so, yes. There's no question that given what happened 12 days ago with that attack, that airstrike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria, which killed 2 senior Iranian generals, given that that happened, that it was effectively on Iranian soil, there was an expectation immediately that the Iranians would have to respond. Remember, the Israelis have not officially claimed responsibility for that attack, but it was clearly them. And ever since then, there has been an expectation Iran would have to respond, and they've said it. I mean, you heard it from that former Mossad commander in Alex's report. The Iranians have told the Israelis they will hit back, and I think there's no question that they will. The question, of course, is how will they hit back? Will they hit back with some sort of calculated response which allows them effectively to save face but not to escalate it even further with an Israeli retaliation? We just don't know. But listen to President Biden speaking within the last hour at the White House.
My expectation sooner than later.
Mr. President, what is your message to Iran in this moment?
Don't.
Are American personnel and assets at risk, Mr. President? Mr. President, are American troops at risk as well?
We are devoted to the defense of Israel. We will support Israel. We will help defend Israel, and Iran will not succeed. Thank you very much.
President Biden there speaking within the last hour or so. I have spoken today to senior officials at the Pentagon, the Defense Department. They have made clear that military assets are being moved to the region. Existing assets in the region are being moved around. The Americans are preparing for some sort of a strike back by Iran that could come very soon indeed. There have been so many moments over the past 6 months where it has been effectively a what-if moment. This is another one. Tensions very, very high in the region.
Mark, for the moment, thank you. Well, the rising tensions in the Middle East and the threat from Putin's Russia have prompted calls for the UK to be more prepared for war. Ex-Armed Forces Minister James Heappey told Sky that the UK should consider sending its forces to Ukraine to train troops. And today, Labour vowed it would build and upgrade Britain's nuclear deterrent and increase defence spending to 2.5% of national income as soon as resources allow. Sky's political correspondent Tamara Cohen reports.
A time of escalating global threats and escalating questions about how Western countries prepare for them and how it's paid for. Britain's adversaries are outspending us, is the warning from the former Armed Forces Minister James Heappey, who served in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Russia has mobilised its entire economy. It will grow its armed forces significantly. But if Ukraine grinds to a stalemate and we end up with a sort of Cold War on broadly the current lines, or, heaven forbid, he is successful in Ukraine, then I think actually we might be in a situation where NATO's numerical superiority rapidly starts to be caught up with.
The man likely to have that dilemma on his plate is Keir Starmer, visiting the shipyard where Britain's next generation of nuclear submarines are being built, making what he calls a cast-iron commitment to maintain the deterrent continuously, complete its replacement here in Barrow-in-Furness, and lift defence spending if Labour win power, turning up the pressure on the Conservatives.
So we've set out a new ambition today to hit 2.5% of GDP spent on defence.
as resources allow. The uncertainties in this world, from war in Europe to conflict in the Middle East to an increasingly aggressive China, means that we need to take our defence more seriously.
Few in politics are in any doubt. We're in a far more dangerous world following Russia's invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago and the threat of widening conflict in the Middle East. The Defence Secretary himself has said the world is on a pre-war footing, with the West facing threats from China, Russia and Iran within the next 5 years.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody.
The Prime Minister, at an event for military veterans, is already being lobbied by senior Tories and within his cabinet to turn on the spending taps.
It could revolutionise how we fight wars.
The Defence Secretary, who has called publicly for a bigger budget than he's currently got, was sceptical of Keir Starmer's commitment.
Well, we're already pledging to get there as soon as we can. But the thing about this announcement today by Keir Starmer is it's just not believable. He specifically said he'll back Trident, that's our nuclear deterrent. Well, 11 members of his shadow team that he's appointed, including his shadow foreign secretary and the Deputy Prime Minister, all voted against the nuclear deterrent. He'll just say whatever he thinks he needs to say, whatever he thinks you need to hear in order to get your vote, and it's just not credible.
But it's the Labour leader who may soon be able to push the nuclear button, trying to reassure the public our security would be in good hands if and when danger surfaces. Tamara Cohen, Sky News.
A former post office boss has apologised today after it was revealed that he blamed cash shortfalls on branch managers with their hands in the till. The comment was made in an email read out in the inquiry into the Post Office Horizon IT scandal, which saw hundreds of sub-postmasters wrongly prosecuted. Sky's business correspondent Paul Kelso reports.
During Alan Cook's 4 years as managing director of the Post Office, more than 160 sub-postmasters were wrongfully convicted.
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly,
He told the public inquiry he was unaware and didn't even know the Post Office had the power to prosecute its own staff.
I'd like to put on record most strongly my personal apology and sympathies with all sub-postmasters, their families and those affected.
But he was confronted with evidence that he once held a more cynical view of sub-postmasters, or subbies.
You go on to say, my instincts tell that in a recession, subbies with their hand in the till choose to blame the technology when they are found to be short of cash. Why was your instinct to think that sub-postmasters who alleged that Horizon caused shortfalls were stealing from the Post Office?
Well, that's an expression I'll regret for the rest of my life. So, you know, it was an inappropriate thing to put in an email.
Sammy Sabbit wrote to Mr Cook multiple times for help after he was wrongfully charged and convicted of a fraud he didn't commit.
It's unbelievable that you think that. It's obvious that they thought that all us sub-postmasters were thieves.
Janet Skinner was also convicted and jailed while Alan Cook was in charge.
And actually today, the 12th of April 2007, was the day that I was released from prison.
Her lawyer asked him how that could have happened on his watch.
Do you have anything by way of a personal direct apology that you would like to say to Mrs Skinner?
I would love to talk to her afterwards, but you may not want to. But I can only apologise on behalf of the whole organisation for the way that you were treated. It was disgraceful. This will be with you for the rest of your life. It will be with me for the rest of my life.
I think they tend to pick and choose what they remember and what they do. He was well aware of what it was doing to people, and I think they just need to realise this is actual people who have destroyed people. It's not just about a computer system.
Adam Crozier was chief executive of the Post Office's holding company Royal Mail Group. He admitted the scandal amounted to a corporate failure.
I think it is a matter of real regret that all of those checks and balances, the governance systems in both companies failed, as well as internal audit, external audit. All the checks and balances that were put in failed to surface this issue out of the Post Office to a wider set of people.
Mr Cook, do you really believe that the sub-postmasters had their hand in the till, sir?
I've given my evidence. I've got nothing more to add today.
The inquiry will continue to hear from senior Post Office and Royal Mail management next week. Paul Kelso, Sky News at the Post Office inquiry.
4 men have been sentenced to a total of 73 years in jail for a drive-by shooting in central London last year, which left a 7-year-old girl in a life-threatening condition. The sawn-off shotgun was fired at mourners at a funeral at a church in Euston, injuring 5 people. Alice Porter has this report, which contains sounds of the shots being fired.
A memorial service which ended in a drive-by shooting. Mourners were gathered outside a church to release doves when a black Toyota drove past, shooting indiscriminately out of the window. The car sped away, leaving 4 adults and 2 children with serious injuries. Tyrrell Lacroix played a leading role in the shooting. He was in the AG gang in North London and believed members of a rival gang would be at the memorial. Jordan Walters and Jashi Perch were in the car, while Alrico Nelson Martin had supplied the shotgun, sawn off for maximum impact. Today, the 4 have been sentenced to a total of 73 years for multiple offences. The impact of the shooting continues to be felt by survivors, both physically and psychologically. A 7-year-old girl has been left with a metal pellet in a muscle next to her heart, which will affect her health for the rest of her life. And one woman told the court that she's gripped with anxiety every time a car goes past. For the Reverend, whose church was at the centre of the shooting, it's been a difficult time supporting the community.
Our thoughts are with the victims, those who were injured in the shooting, but also those who perpetrated the incident. This must be destroying of their lives. It must be very difficult for their families, for their friends, and therefore there are no winners in this situation. Everyone is a victim.
Today's sentence may give some closure to survivors, but the investigation into the shooting is not over.
The 3rd male in the car we have yet to identify, so I'll always appeal to members of the public or anybody watching this, if you have any information around the 3rd male in that car, to call it into the police.
Miraculously, no one was killed in the shooting, but this violent, senseless attack continues to be felt by victims, both young and old. Alice Porter, Sky News.
The grandson of Muriel McKay has travelled to a farm in Hertfordshire in search of her body 55 years after she was killed. Her family say they're tired of waiting for the police to decide whether they'll search the area after the man convicted of killing her said that's where she was buried. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt has this exclusive report.
Mark Dyer was 6 when his grandmother was murdered, her body never found. Her grandson's on a mission to find her.
If you see that bit of shade there, that's approximately where the fence is. And that's where my grandmother is buried, apparently, according to Nizam Hussain.
Hi, I'm Muriel's grandson.
Nizam Hussain is the man convicted of the murder. He met Mark recently. His victim, Mark's grandmother, Muriel McKay. He kidnapped her 55 years ago. Only recently has Hussain told the family where he buried Muriel after she collapsed and died.
2 feet from the hedge, that's where the body is.
We walked the public footpaths towards the farm. And you've never been here?
I've never been here, and it's got me sweaty palmed.
The footpath took us right to the burial spot identified by Muriel's killer.
3 foot in front of the fence. That was the fence line. 3 foot. I feel that she's under me now.
How does that feel?
I mean, brings tears to my eyes.
What do you want to happen now?
Just to extract her, take her away.
2 years ago, Scotland Yard officers dug at the farm but found nothing. The family said they excavated the wrong area and should dig again, but police are still undecided. The landowner would allow a second search, but only if the police agreed to it. Mark Dyer has been threatening to sue the landowner for access. Now he got to meet him.
Sorry, who are you?
I'm Mark Dyer.
Mark, hello, Ian Marsh.
Ian, really nice to meet you.
Come in for a cup of coffee?
I'd love a cup of coffee.
The two men, at odds over a new excavation, chatted for nearly an hour.
If the police tell you they're not going to dig, what happens next?
Then I will come and speak to Ian, because Ian I now have a connection with, and maybe have some sort of resolution. I'm sure that he doesn't want this to continue forever.
We left the farm, Mark Dyer more confident than before that he will get another chance to search for his grandmother's body. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Hertfordshire.
It's the biggest event on the racing calendar, but the Grand National has always been surrounded by debate. Last year, a number of horses died and the main race was delayed after protesters attached themselves to the hedges. This time, organisers have made some changes to increase safety for horses and jockeys, but already 2 horses have died. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris reports from Aintree in Liverpool.
On Merseyside, the sporting and social highlight of the year, Ladies' Day at Aintree. But beyond the glamour and style, suffering. 2 horses put to death after Giovinco fell in today's first race and Piker in the last. It follows 4 deaths at last year's Grand National Festival. Welfare a worry for tomorrow's showpiece race. But for the first woman to win the most gruelling of steeplechases, the test is the toughness.
Getting over every jump and staying out of trouble is what you have to do to win this race.
Some will say 1 death is 1 too many.
They're trying to alleviate risk, you know, it can't ever be eliminated. If you look at the percentages of horses that die in racing, they're so minuscule, and that's just an unfortunate part of what we do.
To reduce the risk of fallers and fatalities, a dozen changes have been introduced, notably reducing the number of horses from 40 to 34, having a standing start rather than a rolling one, moving the start more than an hour earlier to 4 p.m. in the hope of a softer course, and softening fences by using foam and rubber toe boards.
The first fence is now 60 yards closer to the start. It's an attempt to reduce the speed in the early stages and reduce the risk of horses falling. 5 horses failed to make it past the first fence last year, and 1, Hill 16, died.
It followed activists invading the course, delaying the start. A repeat isn't planned by Animal Rising, despite still calling for a ban on jump racing.
These changes, although they are vindicating of the protests last year and of the public's concern of horse racing, they're really not going to make a difference.
Aintree's leaders insist they listen to concerns.
We saw that there was an opportunity to make improvements, but we also want to retain a competitive and exciting event. So there was an element of protecting that, still having an exciting contest, but also seeing the opportunity to make things safer.
And tomorrow, Corroch Rambler is favourite to become only the second back-to-back national winner in 5 decades. The essence of this race is how tough it is. Organisers hope it can be safer without sacrificing the spectacle. Rob Harris, Sky News, Aintree.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Guardian columnist, Zoe Williams, and the political commentator, Benedict Spence. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Daily Mail, its headline, Rayner, I'll quit if I'm found guilty. We'll be right back, so stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, has said she will step down if she's found to have broken the law over her former living arrangements. The US President Joe Biden has said he expects Iran to attack Israel sooner rather than later in retaliation for an attack in Damascus, which killed high-ranking Iranian officers. And a former post office boss has said he regrets writing an email which blamed shortfalls caused by computer glitches on branch managers with their hands in the till. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the political commentator Benedict Spence. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Mail leads with Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner's promise to resign if she's found to have committed criminal wrongdoing over her past housing affairs. The Daily Telegraph pictures her too, making the same pledge. Angela Rayner makes the front of the Mirror as well, with the headline, "Bring it on." But The Times says that the Rayner investigation is also putting pressure on Sir Keir Starmer over his previous statements, agreeing that she'd done nothing wrong. The Express carries a promise of lower taxes from the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. The Guardian leads with calls for the Prime Minister to act to end what is being called the scandalous prosecution of unpaid carers, a story the paper has touched on regularly. According to The Eye, Chinese spies are attempting to seduce British intelligence officials into giving them information as part of a so-called honey trap. The Financial Times reports that a former chairman of the US Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, has suggested that the Bank of England's economic forecast model should be overhauled. The Sun reports that squatters have taken over a pub in London owned by TV chef Gordon Ramsay. And news you can use from The Star. Nature broadcaster Chris Packham says we shouldn't be afraid of Asian hornets. But should we approach them? And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Zoe Williams and Benedict Spence. We're going to start off with the Mail. Zoe, take us into this front page. First of all, she'll quit if found guilty. This is Angela Rayner, of course.
So the Mail has been going hardest on Angela Rayner over this story, which initially was an HMRC question whether she'd paid enough capital gains tax. Obviously, as we all know, although I'm not all over the detail, that you pay a different amount of tax depending on whether it's your first or second home, and obviously that's not a problem for most people, but MPs always do have to. So. But if it had stopped there, then there would have been, I think they would have had to drop it, because in the end, that wouldn't have been a criminal matter. It would have been a matter for the HMRC, and the HMRC would have been up against, their investigation of Zahawi, for example, who was found to owe them many, many multiples of what it is thought that Angela Rayner could. The sums we're talking about are really, really small. However, somebody, she thinks mischievously, has reported her to the Greater Manchester Police on the basis of breaking electoral law by declaring on the rolls the wrong house that she wasn't full-time living at. Now, she is really scrappy on this, and I think she knows that she's innocent. And furthermore, this law that she putatively broke, it's not a serious matter. I think the maximum sanction is a £1,000 fine for it. So it's nothing. It's really not in the ballpark of anything that should cause a scandal around an MP or a deputy leader. But what the Mail and in fact a lot of the newspapers have been very successful at is just using words like police arrest. I'll quit if this happens. They even when they talk about her tax affairs now, it makes her sound a little bit dodgy. So I kind of think she's being chased just for fun. I think it's a kind of cat and mouse game. And I think the problem is nobody is all over the detail. So even when she walks away from it, people will be like, wasn't she that one who that weird thing happened with? So the kind of, I think it's very unfair on her. And I think whatever the scenario, the kind of misdemeanors would be so trifling that they shouldn't really be touching it.
So you think she will walk away unscathed?
I think so, but I think she'll... Yeah.
But Benedict, I mean, obviously, well, Conservatives are saying the complete opposite, that this is a really serious offence, and they're very pleased that the police are now investigating.
Well, she says that she'll resign if she's convicted. I mean, thanks to the current state of the criminal justice system, even if she is convicted, that could take 3 years. So, yeah, there's plenty of road left, and I'm sure that we all thank the Conservatives for leaving the criminal justice system in that state. I think to have come out and said, sort of quite vociferously, I will resign if I've broken the law, I think that suggests that she's, at the very least, had legal advice that sort of sets her mind at rest, and probably, I suspect, sets many other people within the party their mind at rest. I think this could have been nipped in the bud a lot quicker, I think with a little bit more transparency, maybe a little bit more humbleness, rather than, you know, coming out and saying that this is a witch hunt, this is an attack, just gone, look, maybe I've made a mistake, this wasn't very clear, maybe I haven't made a mistake, but this is what I was led to believe, and this is fine. I think we could have moved on from this. I think Zoe's right that there is far more there's far more road, if you like, to get out of going after alleged sleaze in the Conservative Party. Angela Rayner has done that a lot. I think you're always therefore going to paint a target on your back to your opponents if you set yourself up of being a champion of being against sleaze. But I think that this is a shot across the bows for the Labour Party. Look, they're able to make a little bit of hay out of this story. It may not amount to anything, but that's because they are going to be the party of government almost certainly in a couple of months' time, and there is going to be a lot more scrutiny on the affairs, not just of Angela Rayner, but of absolutely everybody. And, of course, there would, with an election win, be a great big raft of new candidates, new MPs that we haven't seen before, and then the scrutiny will start. And Labour haven't been in power for a very long time. Perhaps some of them aren't used to what that might entail. I think that it needs to be a wake-up call. Even if nothing untoward has actually happened, it does need to be a wake-up call to say, look, you guys, you're going to be in government. This is the big leagues now. There can't be any ambiguity, because you can't allow a story to snowball if there isn't actually a story to begin with, because these allegations, they do create headlines, and that's not helpful.
So does it put Sir Keir Starmer in a sticky position? Because initially he was very strident in saying that she'd done nothing wrong. Since the advent of the police investigation, he's not gone that far anymore.
Well, I mean, this is Keir Starmer, right? So there was absolutely no way he was going to be a, you know, manana guy. He was never going to say, oh, it's probably fine. He was never going to say, you know, what's...
But he sort of was at the beginning, though, wasn't he?
No,
saying that she'd definitely done nothing wrong.
He thought at the beginning that when he thought it was just a tax matter, and the matter of the tax was really trifling compared to Conservatives. And, you know, if you look at Rishi Sunak's wife's non-dom status, Rishi Sunak's green card, Zahawi's massive tax misdemeanours, and then you say Angela Rayner might have mispaid her capital gains tax by £1,500. Anybody would look at that and think this is just ridiculous. This is malicious, and not even malicious in a serious way. It's kind of malicious in a cheeky way. But yes, you're right. Once it became a matter of the law, then what's Keir Starmer going to do? He's going to be asked every time he goes anywhere, will she have to resign if she breaks the law? And I think she probably said she would resign if she'd broken the law under pressure from him, because, again, I go back to my original point, he's Keir Starmer. He's never going to be cool about people breaking the law.
Well, nobody should be cool about that.
Because that's the law. If you're accused of having broken the law, it's a very useful thing to have the former Director of Public Prosecutions as the person that you answer to say, look, I've spoken to a lawyer, but could you have a look over this and perhaps help me draft a statement, because if anybody knows whether I've broken it or not, it's probably going to be you.
You can imagine Boris Johnson. I mean, like, just think in an alternative universe.
How did we get onto Boris Johnson?
We always do, somehow.
I was just trying to think of a Prime Minister who didn't seem to mind people breaking the law. And Boris Johnson was just such a Prime Minister.
But just on the subject of Boris Johnson, these small stories that snowball, of course, Partygate was something that, you know, a lot of Conservatives thought, oh, it's nothing, it'll blow over, and it brought down a government eventually. So even if nothing comes from this, again, That's why I think the Labour Party needs to learn you can't get away, there can be no slack. There needs to be discipline.
What should they have done then?
Brought down a government, but
It did. Well, it brought
really.
down a semblance of a government, and then the next government brought itself down after a month.
What should Sir Keir Starmer have done then?
I mean,
instead?
I think there needed to be just transparency from the very start. The fact was that there was, suggestion that this is a witch hunt and all that sort of thing. You can't, I think, play that game of playing the victim when you are in the ascendancy. You just need to be a little bit more bullish about that. You need to be a bit more Tory about it, frankly. You need to just brush it off you.
I think she thought she was being a bit more Tory about it. You know, she thought her original response was, go, whatever that word is, yourself.
Go manana, yeah. I mean,
and that is how many members, certainly of kind of the administration previous to the last one, would have reacted. So I think she was trying to kind of display a bit of that impunity, but with right on her side,
but
and
again,
that didn't nip it in the bud.
Well, we need to wait and see whether. I mean, I suspect that she is in the right. We do need to wait and see if there is an investigation ongoing. But again, we saw Keir Starmer the other day getting a little bit shirty with a reporter, about the line of questioning. This is not going to be the first one of these sort of fishing expeditions or stories where an MP is involved in, something untoward or accused of being involved in something untoward. He's not going to be able to respond like that. I mean, look at the stick that Rishi Sunak gets for being very prickly when people ask him questions. Potentially quite difficult questions. Actually, if you've got the lead that he does, Keir Starmer, why on earth is he getting prickly over these? These should be the sort of thing that you're able to take in your stride, and he's clearly not entirely comfortable with it.
I just think you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the Labour Party, that we've been, it's such a different order of magnitude. You've got Rishi Sunak keeping his green card for reasons that can have only had to do with his own preservation of wealth.
I don't think anybody ever accused him of having a green card illegally. That would have been a hell of a story.
It wasn't illegal, but it was, there's a huge amount going on with Sunak and Zahawi, in which they try and conserve vast amounts of wealth from HMRC, and this trifling amount, it's very infuriating for Labour politicians.
I think what we would both agree on is that Labour could do a lot of good by simplifying the tax code in this country so that there were fewer loopholes for people to try and get around paying tax. Would we agree on that?
OK, yeah, sure.
There we go.
But if laws have been broken, as we say, there is a police investigation going on, so we will wait to see the outcome of that. Just very quickly, the Express on the Chancellor promising, again, tax cuts.
I mean, I kind of feel as though we've lived this psychodrama for the last couple of months. Jeremy Hunt promising that there are going to be tax cuts in the next budget, in the next statement. You get closer and closer and closer, and then they don't turn up. And then we wait a couple of weeks, and they just assume, oh, we've forgotten all about that, and I'm going to start promising tax cuts again. Ultimately, they trailed all of this before the spring budget, that there were going to be lots of tax cuts, and then, oh, well, we can't afford this and we can't afford that. But there is going to be this tiny little one here. And it did absolutely nothing to shift the dial of public opinion. Absolutely nobody went, oh, fantastic, we're going to lose a P in VAT or whatever it is. Oh, we're going to vote for you because we trust you to see this through. It really is just sort of howling in the wind at this point from the Tories. Nobody believes that they are currently the party of low tax. They've had umpteen opportunities to do it. They've not followed through on it. Now I think people are looking here and saying, well, when are these tax cuts going to go in? Before or after this hypothetical election that you still can't tell us when it's going to be? Nobody's buying this.
Well, the government is saying they are now ready to cut taxes.
Jolly good. Not the 14 years before. Now. Fantastic.
OK, we're going to take a break. Thank you both. Coming up, apparently Chinese spies are setting honey traps for British targets. We'll be discussing that next, along with other stories. Do stay with us.
It's a play by Sonia Kelly that was written in 2021. And I watched it on live stream. And at the time, the case was still open. It was closed shortly afterwards. And I just thought it was a really beautiful way of approaching the story. I'm a local to Putney myself, and that story very much stayed with me every time I walked across Putney Bridge. It was something that I thought about. It really lived on in the minds of the people around the theatre. And I just thought it would be a fantastic way of putting the case back in the public eye.
know nothing about the jogger because the police never found him.
Yeah.
We don't actually know anything about the woman who was pushed either because she's not come forward.
Yeah.
So how much of the play is based on fact and how much is fiction?
So it sort of fictionalises the incident in terms of what the motivating factors could be for something like this to happen. The bus driver was identified, so Sonia Kelly was very much inspired by Olivier Selbris, but it doesn't really attempt to exactly portray what might have happened. It's more of an idea of the motivating factors.
That's right, and the bus driver who skillfully avoided the woman, thankfully. And obviously that the hope would be that a play will remind people of the incident, might jog some memories, people might come forward. As you say, the case has been closed by the police, but they do say if there was new information, they'd of course reopen it.
Yeah.
But do you worry that by fictionalising events, people might be tempted to look in the wrong direction, if you like, because we have no idea actually who these people were?
I think that the wider point that the play is trying to make is that we are sort of conditioned in big cities to believe that we have the right of way, and these sorts of aggressions are happening all the time. You know, if you get on a tube at rush hour, people shove you in, and that shove is not okay. So I think that it separates it enough from the incident to be able to say, look, this is happening all the time, and if we act a bit kinder, then we can start sort of healing those cracks in our fragmented society. But I don't think there's a particular danger because it is also accurate in terms of the fact that it talks through the events and the day, and it shows the footage as well. I think for everyone locally, there's a question mark over whether some of the people who were originally involved in the incident might come to the play itself.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Zoe Williams and Benedict Spence. Let's take a look at the Eye. And this story, you kick us off with this, Benedict, about Chinese spies potentially seducing British targets.
Well, Zoe's not going to forgive me now if I don't tell everybody about the thing that makes me laugh about this story, which is, you know, when I hear the word Chinese and honey, I'm just immediately transported back to the era when Winnie the Pooh, who was famously trapped in a tree in his bid to get honey, was banned in China because he was used as a figure to parody Xi Jinping. There you go, not related to this story at all.
But I do remember
very
it.
Funny. In many ways, this is quite reassuring to know that old-fashioned spy working still going strong, and that our spies are actually desirable enough and we're considered important enough to try this sort of thing. Apparently, plenty of British intelligence officers are being targeted by Chinese intelligence in good old-fashioned sort of sex traps, honey traps, whatever it is, try to get them back into their hotels, try to start relationships with them in a bid to try and get information out of them. And as I say, it's really quite gratifying to think that they have such a high opinion of our intelligence services that they're actually prepared to go to these lengths, especially after the Chinese foreign diplomat a couple of nights ago suggested that we were not actually a competitor at all in international markets or in foreign policy, that we were just a country that existed on the periphery of Europe. So it's nice to know that actually there are two parts of the Chinese state that don't necessarily see eye to eye on this.
So do you agree with Benedict that we should be flattered?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I was reading something earlier about this centre-right historian at Cambridge who's written a book about who the global powers are and considers the UK still a global power. I was thinking, really? But the metrics are, you know, are you militarised? Yes, we are. Are you kind of taken seriously in defence? I suppose so, insofar as anybody is.
We have nuclear submarines.
Exactly. We've got all those.
Somehow.
Yeah, somehow.
I mean, it's the on-running joke, isn't it? Whenever Ukraine blows something up in Russia, they blame the UK for having a role in it, and we all think, well, if only we were as capable as the Russians seem to think that we were. Imagine what a power we would be.
You say that kind of if only, but there was, you know, there was a lot of traffic from Putin about when he wanted to use his nuclear weapons, how we would be second after Ukraine. So it's not very reassuring, but nevertheless, it's stories like this that make you think maybe the UK is kind of historically considered enough of a world power to warrant trying to seduce its civil servants. But, you know, what is surprising, you know, honey traps are as old as time, or certainly as old as James Bond, which is both the same, in my view. But I don't remember a time when there's been so much hostility between nations, or so much overt hostility.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a worry, because the article is talking about fears of UK politicians and business people remaining vulnerable to extortion. So it's quite a serious story as well. The FT, Benedict, you tell us about why the Bank of England's forecasting model needs overhauling, and who says so?
Sorry, this is, Mr. Bernanke.
Ben Bernanke.
Ben Bernanke, I was about to say, it's similar to mine, isn't it? Ben Bernanke has suggested that the Bank of England's forecasting models are out of date. He's talking about their computer systems and also how it is that they decide things like interest rates, how they should be set, that this doesn't actually, it's not fit for purpose. And I think anybody who's looked at the UK's economic performance and how the bank has responded to it in the last couple of years might say there may be something in that.
Yeah.
I think that there has been, from my understanding, I'm not an economist, but from economist friends of mine, there is a complaint that there is a bit too much groupthink within the Bank of England, that it is sort of not only set in its ways, but it sort of has one direction that it looks in, and that maybe a slightly more dynamic central bank, as other countries tend to have, might be a little more open to sort of conflicts and discussions around different sorts of economic models within. But this is about the technology, I think, specifically, and saying that actually these models are out of date.
It's definitely the technology, but it is also the formulas they're using. He's saying are out of date. But there are a couple of interesting things. One is that when I saw that Ben Bernanke had gone in to tell them their models were wrong, I didn't realise they'd asked him to come in.
Yes,
and so
Andrew Bailey's been quite receptive to this.
Crikey, that is really bad that Americans are just allowed to come in.
That he just rocked up and said, wow, this place.
Wow, this place sucks, guys. So number one, nobody panic. Number two, part of the reason for his diagnosis that the models were bust was that our inflation got out of control to a much greater degree than the rest of Europe.
But there's the failure to predict that jump in inflation.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure that modelling that better would have helped. It still would have been very hard to control, and you know.
The underlying economic issues are still there.
Exactly. Sometimes it's like it's better not to know you're about to be punched in the face.
It's probably always better not to know. Very, very quickly, The Sun and this story, Gordon Ramsay is not very happy.
I mean, he's never happy, right? So
he's really unhappy
now. So it's actually there's something really satisfying when something bad does happen to him, because at least
you can't say that.
Come on, at least he's got his temper for a reason. Otherwise, he's just in a bad mood.
So what's happened?
How can you not
Ramsay's
agree with
kitchen
me?
nightmare is what's happened. People have moved into his. I think his pub is worth 13 million. It's a very swanky place, and there are squatters in there, and they've used his kit to barricade themselves in. They're in there eating his snacks, eating his bar snacks, and he's called the police, but he can't get them out. And you think, well, good Lord, who would have thought, being a TV chef, you'd think you'd have more authority, more power to be able to, intimidate these people. He shouts at enough people on television and it scares them, but apparently these people are entirely unintimidated.
They're not moving, and Gordon's at the end of his tether, and there we must leave it for this section. Thank you both. Let's take a look at the weather for you now. Well, cooler and more unsettled weather will return this weekend, but there will be spells of spring sunshine between the showers. Apart from some heavy and blustery showers in the northwest, most places will have a dry and mild start to Saturday. However, low cloud and mist will affect many southern and western coasts with spots of rain. Cloud and outbreaks of patchy rain will spread into much of England and Wales through the day, but the south east should stay sunny and warm. It'll be cooler for Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland.